Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I woke up early, not because I had anything exciting planned, but because something in me couldn't rest. There's a certain heaviness that clings to you when you know you're about to be disappointed, but you're still holding out a shred of hope like an idiot. My phone sat on the nightstand like a little judge, screen dark and silent. I reached for it, almost scared to look. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe anyone, would remember. Maybe they'd surprise me. But no, nothing. Not a single text. No missed calls. Not even one of those automated e-cards that my mom used to send when she was too busy to talk. It was my birthday, and the silence was louder than any message I could have received. I turned over and stared at the ceiling, counting the little cracks in the paint like they might distract me from the pit forming in my gut. This wasn't the first time they forgot. It wasn't even the second. It was the third time in a row. 3 years. That's not forgetfulness. That's a choice. Last year, I got a belated phone call from my mom 2 days late, her voice bright and fake, acting like she'd just gotten back from a long nap. The year before that, I got nothing but a Facebook memory of an old birthday post I'd made for Emily when she turned 25. It was like my own life was happening in black and white while hers played in full Technicolor with surround sound and champagne. Still, I checked social media. That was my real mistake. The first thing I saw was Emily's post, her smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower, arms spread wide, the lights of Paris behind her like a goddamn fairy tale. The caption was pure icing. Best birthday ever. Thanks Mom and Dad for the Paris dream trip. I love you guys to the moon and back. I blinked. Read it again. Then read it a third time, like maybe the words would change the more I stared. But no, they stayed the same. Like a slap to the face written in perfect cursive. They flew her to Paris. For her birthday. While I sat alone in my apartment, turning 40, eating stale toast and pretending I didn't care. A Paris dream trip. From the same parents who told me last month that money's been tight lately when I casually mentioned a birthday dinner. I wasn't asking for the moon. Just a meal. Maybe some pasta. Maybe a hug. It's not about the money. God, if it were only about the money, this would be easy. It's about being chosen. Prioritized. Loved out loud. And I never was. Emily always had a spotlight. I had a flashlight in the corner, flickering. I've spent most of my life convincing myself that my parents loved me in their own way, which is just what people say when they don't want to admit that maybe they didn't. The worst part is, I didn't even feel surprised. That's how you know it's real. When it doesn't feel like betrayal anymore, it just feels like routine. Like a bad habit you've given up on breaking. Like traffic on the way to work. You don't even get mad about it after a while. You just sit there, numb, letting the hours pass you by. I didn't cry. Not at first. I made coffee. I watered my plants. I answered emails like it was just another Tuesday. But then I saw the group photo Emily posted on her story, Mom and Dad smiling, holding champagne flutes, faces pressed close together under the golden lights of some Parisian restaurant. Mom had on that red scarf she saves for special occasions, and Dad actually looked happy, like genuinely relaxed, something I hadn't seen from him since I was a kid. That's when it hit me. That smile was never for me. Not once. I remembered my 30th birthday. 10 years ago. I threw a backyard barbecue myself. Bought the food. Lit the grill. Invited them. They showed up late and left early because Dad had a thing in the morning. Emily brought some guy she was seeing at the time and spent the whole day glued to his side. I spent the evening cleaning up solo, blowing out a candle on a half-melted cupcake. That memory came back so sharp it felt physical. Like I'd been punched in the stomach from the inside. I put my phone down. Sat with the silence. Then I made a decision. Not the kind you announce. Not the kind you post about or even talk through with friends. A quiet decision. Cold and final. I opened my contacts and blocked them. Mom, Dad, and yes, Emily. I deleted the group chat. I unfollowed, unsubscribed, and erased the last 10 years of polite pretending from my phone like I was scrubbing off old rust. Then I sat on the edge of the couch and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was breathing air that actually belonged to me. Like I'd stepped out of a room I didn't know was suffocating me. Let them sit in the quiet now. Let them wonder. Let them twist in the absence they helped build. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't send a dramatic message. I just disappeared. And you know what? Sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can say. I didn't feel the full weight of what I'd done until the next morning when I reached for my phone on autopilot, the way you do when you're half awake and looking for connection, some kind of proof that you still matter to someone, somewhere. I opened my messages, expecting something, anything, but of course, I had wiped it all clean the night before, and now the silence felt deliberate, like I had locked the door and thrown away the key. My phone was on airplane mode, not technically but emotionally, and for once, I wasn't racing to switch it back on. It's wild, really, the number of little things you talk yourself out of feeling for the sake of keeping the peace, for not rocking the boat, for not seeming like the bitter one. I've swallowed more apologies than I've ever received, and I've smiled through so many birthday dinners that never happened, laughed at jokes I wasn't in on, and stood clapping in the back while they raised toasts to Emily like she'd cured cancer. Every time I raised my hand to speak, it felt like someone else's voice always came louder, brighter, more charming, more special. My birthdays, when they were remembered at all, came in the form of those cards with glitter that falls off and sticks to your fingers for days, or maybe a plastic bag from the drugstore with a candle that says 40 is fabulous when no one really believed it. I remember one year they gave me a gas station gift card with a half-used balance. I'm not even making that up. I smiled and said thank you because that's what I was taught to do. Gratitude, even when it burns, even when it feels like swallowing broken glass. Meanwhile, Emily got these elaborate handmade photo albums with pastel bows and captions written in calligraphy, every page filled with carefully curated moments of her life, recitals, beach trips, award ceremonies, and the captions always said things like, "Our shining star" or "the light of our lives." She got themed parties, full spa days, monogrammed robes, and cake toppers shaped like ballet shoes. There was this one year when they turned the entire backyard into a fake Paris cafe for her 16th birthday, complete with string lights and croissants flown in from some overpriced bakery in the city. I remember handing out plastic cups of lemonade to her friends while they giggled about boys and whispered secrets, and when I looked over to our mom for a moment of recognition, all she said was, "Claire, don't just stand there, help clean up those napkins." But the thing about memory is that it doesn't fade as much as people want it to. It sharpens with time, like glass under pressure, and what once seemed like isolated slights start to form a pattern, a shape, a cruel kind of consistency. I remember the year Emily got her first car, used, but still shiny, still gift-wrapped, and they handed her the keys with tears in their eyes like they were passing down the family legacy. I took the bus well into my 20s, and when I finally bought a beat-up Honda with my own money, they told me to be careful on the highway, sweetie, and went right back to watching the game. I mean, when someone forgets your birthday once, it hurts. Twice? That's a pattern. But 3 times in a row over the last 5 years? That's not an accident, it's a decision. And before someone rushes to point it out, yes, I know what I said doesn't make sense. 3 times in a row doesn't fit in 5 years. But when you're hurt, math stops mattering. It's the feeling that stacks up, not the numbers. Try explaining fractions to your gut when it's twisting in knots. So after I blocked them, I sat on the couch for hours like a woman waiting for an earthquake that had already happened. I didn't cry, and I didn't eat, and I didn't do anything except stare at the wall and wonder if they'd even notice I was gone. Would they feel the weight of the space I used to take up? Would the absence of my name in their phones or my likes on their posts mean anything to them? Or would they just shrug and go back to ordering overpriced wine on the Champs-Élysées? The first one to notice was my mother, which I should have predicted because she's always been the one who feels everything loudly when it's convenient and not at all when it counts. Less than 24 hours after I cut the cord, she left a voicemail on my phone. I didn't answer, but the transcription popped up. The message was nearly 2 minutes long, mostly sobs and dramatic pauses, the kind of voice you'd expect from someone who'd just been told their daughter died in a car crash. "Claire," she gasped like she was choking on my name. "I don't know what we did, but you're scaring me. Please don't do this. This is breaking my heart." Breaking her heart? That was Rich. The same woman who forgot her firstborn child's birthday, again, now wanted to cry foul because the silence had finally turned on her. She sounded like she couldn't understand what had changed, like she genuinely believed this came out of nowhere. That's what happens when you ignore the fault lines. You're shocked by the quake, even though the ground was cracking for years. I played the message once, then again, and then I deleted it. Not because I wanted to erase it, but because I didn't want it sitting there like bait, trying to pull me back into a conversation I no longer had any interest in having. I had spent most of my adult life trying to fix something that none of them ever admitted was broken. This time, I wasn't reaching out to patch it. I was burning the blueprint. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. Cold, yes. Sad, of course. But underneath it all, there was a strange, steady warmth, something like relief, something like truth. Because when the people who claim to love you only do it when it's convenient for them, the best thing you can do is leave them alone with their silence. And wait to see how long they can stand the echo. The thing about silence is that people can't handle it for long, especially the kind of people who have always depended on your forgiveness to feel better about their own behavior. It only took 2 days for the ripple to start spreading, like a rumor in a small town or a slow leak in a boat no one wants to admit is sinking. The first message came from Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year, though she somehow always managed to send Emily long-winded Facebook comments on every vacation photo. Her message wasn't long, but it was heavy in that passive-aggressive way that older women perfect over decades of practice. "Claire, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on," she wrote, "but your mother's beside herself. She hasn't slept, she's been crying, and your father is just devastated. Please don't shut us out like this. We're family." Family. That word again. The same one they only ever seem to dust off when they need something, when it's convenient, or when someone finally pushes back on years of quiet disrespect. I read the message twice, rolled my eyes, and didn't respond. It didn't take long before the rest followed. Uncle Pete, my cousin Jordan, even Emily's best friend Mallory, who I barely know but who felt compelled to send me a private message that began with, "Hey girl, I don't want to get in the middle," but, which of course means she very much wanted to be in the middle. Apparently, my mother's sobbing voicemail had made its rounds like a chain letter, passed from one sympathetic ear to another until I had somehow become the family pariah, the ungrateful daughter who broke her poor mother's heart for no reason. Then came the email from my father, which felt less like a message and more like a statement submitted to the press. It was 2 lines long. "Claire, we don't understand what happened. I don't know what we did to deserve this." That was it. No subject line, no greeting, not even a sign-off. Just those 2 hollow sentences that rang out like an accusation wrapped in confusion. And then there was Emily. I hadn't checked her social media since the Paris debacle, but I was curious, curiosity always being the soft spot in my spine that I can't seem to straighten. Her latest Instagram story was a black background with a single sentence written in white text. "Some people will always hate your light because it makes their shadows feel deeper." No names, of course. No direct call-out. But it didn't take a detective to know exactly who she was talking about. The comments underneath were filled with support, with people telling her to rise above the jealousy, to keep shining, and to never dim her light for anyone. Suddenly, I was the villain. The unstable one. The jealous sister. The cold-hearted daughter who couldn't even answer her mother's tearful calls. It didn't matter that they forgot me, that they erased me from their thoughts year after year. All that mattered now was that I had finally stopped playing along, and in doing so, I had broken the spell. And people hate it when you break the spell, when you stop smiling, stop apologizing, stop making their guilt easier to swallow. They don't see it as healing. They see it as betrayal. And I'll admit it, part of me started to doubt myself. I went back over the messages, re-listened to the voicemail, read my father's email a dozen times. I wondered if maybe I had gone too far, if I had made it into a bigger deal than it really was. Maybe forgetting a birthday wasn't the end of the world. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I remembered all the birthdays I never missed. All the dinners I attended, gifts I bought, cards I signed, phone calls I made. I remembered the time I drove 2 hours through snow just to make it to Emily's engagement party because Mom said it would mean the world to the family if I came. I remembered watching them beam at her like she had invented joy itself, while I stood in the back with a gift bag and no one even asked how my week had been. I remembered. And that was enough. I decided to do something reckless, which for me meant going into the basement storage closet where I kept the boxes I never opened, the kind full of things you're not ready to throw out but can't look at either. I pulled out the dusty bin labeled family stuff and sat on the cold concrete floor like a teenager on a nostalgia binge. Old photo albums, yellowed birthday cards, school awards, and then, buried between two thick binders, was a white envelope marked Emily, 18. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately, even though I hadn't seen it in years outside of tax forms and scribbled grocery lists. I opened it without thinking, without guilt, because whatever illusion of privacy they believed in died the day they left me behind. The letter was 3 full pages, front and back, handwritten in blue ink with care and precision I didn't think my father was capable of anymore. It was overflowing with pride, with hopes, with words like darling and angel, and you are the best thing that ever happened to us. It read like poetry, like a eulogy for a person still alive, like a prayer. There was a paragraph about how Emily had restored joy to their lives, how she had given them purpose again, and how she was the second chance they didn't know they needed. And then there was the line that froze the blood in my chest. It read, "We didn't think we could ever feel this way again after what happened with Claire." I read it once. I read it again. I read it so many times the words lost shape, just black loops on white paper, twisting into nothing. After what happened with Claire. Like I was some tragic event, some trauma they had to recover from. Not a person. Not a daughter. A thing that happened. Something to survive. I sat on that floor for almost an hour, staring at the letter, trying to decide whether to laugh or scream or vomit. And somewhere in the middle of that spinning storm, I realized something terrifying. Maybe they never really saw me as a daughter at all. Maybe I was just the shadow Emily was meant to outshine. I kept the letter hidden in the drawer beside my bed, not because I was protecting it, but because I wasn't ready to look at it again. Not while the words still echoed in my head like a funeral bell that wouldn't stop ringing. I didn't need to reread it to remember every word. That one sentence, what happened with Claire, played over and over like a scratched record, turning in slow circles while I lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what exactly they meant. Was I some failed experiment, a disappointment so large they couldn't say it out loud? Was I their original mistake, the one they didn't know how to love right? I'd spent years accepting favoritism as a personality flaw of theirs, like a bad habit you just learn to live around. I figured Emily was simply easier for them, more pleasant, more agreeable, the golden child they could parade around without effort or confrontation. But the letter made something else crystal clear. Emily wasn't just the favorite. She was the only one they ever wanted. And me? I was a storm they never recovered from. It took everything in me not to call and scream. Not because I thought it would help, but because some wounds feel like they need noise to make them real. But instead of dialing the phone, I sat with the silence. I sat with it for hours, days, long enough for the rage to harden into resolve. I needed answers, but not from them. I needed someone who wasn't still pretending, someone who had been there from the beginning and wouldn't feed me the same sugar-coated bullshit. And I knew exactly who that person was. My godmother Diane had always been the family's lone truth-teller, the black sheep who lived alone in a townhouse with overgrown ivy, too many cats, and no patience for polite fiction. Growing up, I remember she'd let me sit on her couch and watch soap operas while she smoked menthols near the open window and muttered things like, "Your mother's too tightly wound for her own good." She never married, never had kids, and never pretended to like anyone she didn't. I hadn't seen her in years, but I knew she'd tell me what nobody else would. When I showed up at her house unannounced, she didn't look surprised, not even a little. She just stepped aside, let me in, and asked if I still took cream in my coffee. The place smelled like cinnamon and cat litter, and it looked like every surface held some kind of memory or trinket she didn't want to part with. I followed her into the kitchen and waited until the mugs were full before I said anything. "Did something happen to me when I was born?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Something that made them hate me?" She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just stirred her coffee like I'd asked her what the weather was like. "Not hate, Claire," she said after a moment. "Not hate. But your mother didn't handle it well. She wasn't ready. And she wasn't kind." I didn't speak. I let her fill the space because I knew she would. Diane didn't believe in pauses unless they meant something. She had postpartum, she said, watching my face carefully. Bad. The kind that doesn't just go away after a few months. She never admitted it, of course. Back then, no one talked about that kind of thing, especially not women like her, who thought motherhood was supposed to fix everything. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb it, but also trying not to collapse under the weight of finally having an answer. "She felt like having you trapped her," Diane continued, now leaning back in her chair, her eyes fixed on some distant spot behind me. "She was young, married too fast, and you came along when she was still dreaming of freedom. I remember her crying in the laundry room when you were 3 weeks old, saying she didn't know who she was anymore. She resented you, Claire. She didn't mean to, but she did. It wasn't exactly shocking. I'd always felt the coldness, the distance, the way she smiled too tight when I asked for affection or told her something vulnerable. But hearing it out loud, hearing that my existence had been a kind of prison sentence to her, still hit like a punch. "What about Dad?" I asked, barely able to form the words. Diane shrugged. He didn't know what to do with her sadness. So he poured himself into work and pretended it would pass. When Emily came along, everything was different. Your mom was older, calmer, more prepared. And your dad, well, he saw it as a second chance to get it right. So that was it. Emily wasn't just the favorite, she was the redemption arc. The reboot. The daughter they could finally love without guilt or confusion. And I was the first draft they never wanted to reread. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The way my mother praised Emily's grace, her patience, her soft voice. The way Dad always said you could learn a thing or two from your sister, as if I hadn't been trying to be enough since I was 5 years old. I sat there in Diane's kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold, and felt the truth settle inside me like cement. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defective. They were. They had spent their lives treating me like a ghost of their past while worshipping Emily as the hope of their future. They didn't love me less. They loved me wrong. And now they were going to feel what it was like to be shut out, to be ignored, to be the ones left wondering what went wrong while I finally stopped trying to fix a picture I was never even in. Because silence wasn't just my defense anymore. It was my revenge. Let them sit in the quiet, wondering if I'll ever pick up the phone. Let them replay every voicemail, reread every email, search every sentence for the clue they'll never find. I've spent decades begging them to see me. Now they can beg for a glimpse of the daughter they lost long before I disappeared. I didn't plan the ending, not at first anyway. Some people will tell you revenge takes shape in the heat of the moment, driven by adrenaline and impulse, but the truth is that real revenge, good revenge, the kind that haunts, simmers, and sticks, is born in the quiet. It's grown in stillness, fed by all the words you never said out loud, watered by the memory of every time you smiled through a hurt and called it strength. I sat on my bed one night, well past midnight, with the lights off and my laptop open, staring at the blinking cursor like it might type the right words for me. And then I just started writing. Not to them, not for them, but for me. The letter was never meant to be mailed, and I knew it from the first line. It was the kind of writing that oozed out like blood from a deep cut you forgot was still open. I told the truth in that letter, the whole truth, the ugly, fractured, cruel truth that I had never dared say aloud. I wrote about the birthdays they forgot, and the ones I remembered for them anyway. I wrote about the night I cried into my steering wheel after hearing Dad call Emily the light of our lives while introducing her to friends, not once acknowledging I existed. I wrote about how exhausting it was to always forgive, to always understand, to always be the one who doesn't make a scene. I wrote about the photo. That stupid photo. The one that started it all. The picture of them with Emily in Paris, glasses raised, cheeks glowing, the golden light behind them making it look like the universe itself had been celebrating her existence. I stared at that image so long I memorized the curve of my mother's smile and the tilt of my father's head. They looked happier than I'd ever seen them. And I knew, with a calm certainty that settled deep in my chest, that I wasn't in that photo for a reason. I wasn't supposed to be. That picture was the family they always wanted. The one where I didn't exist. So I printed it. I went to the pharmacy, used the little photo kiosk in the corner that still smells faintly like toner and forgotten lunches, and I printed that moment on glossy paper. For by 6 inches of proof. Then I walked into a thrift store and found the perfect frame. Gold, a little gaudy, like something that belonged on a mantle. I slipped the photo in, wrapped it in plain brown paper, and mailed it to their house with no return address. No card. No note. No explanation. Just a photo of the family they always acted like they had. I sent it the week of Father's Day. The message was clear without words. Here's your family. Here's the moment you chose. Hang it up, frame it for real, put it in the center of the living room if you want. Just don't call it a coincidence anymore. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were doing. Weeks passed. Then months. And like flies to the scent of guilt, they started to swarm. My inbox filled slowly, then all at once, emails from my mother, subject lines like please and talk to us and we love you, some long and rambling, some just a few empty lines, begging for a response. My father sent one message, short and sharp, I never wanted to hurt you. Emily sent a string of texts, trying to play both sides, painting herself as confused and heartbroken, but also subtly implying I was blowing things out of proportion. You're being really unfair, she said in one message. We're all hurting too, she said in another. And then, like some twisted cherry on top, came the invitation to join them for family therapy, an offer so performative I could practically hear the therapist's office diffuser in the background. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I was done explaining myself. I wasn't interested in dragging my pain into another room where it would be debated, dissected, and dismissed. I'd already lived the evidence. I'd already survived the trial. I didn't need a jury. I just needed peace. And peace came. It came in small waves, quiet mornings without guilt, dinners without the weight of obligation, laughter that didn't come with an apology at the end. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but it was real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval like a starving dog. I wasn't writing long paragraphs to justify my existence. I wasn't waiting to be seen. Then one evening, I saw her. I was coming back from the grocery store, hands full of paper bags, when I spotted her standing across the street, just outside my building. My mother. No umbrella, no coat, just standing there with her arms at her sides, staring up at my window like she wasn't sure what floor I lived on. She didn't wave. She didn't move. She just stood there. I didn't approach her. I didn't call out. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my heart beating too loud in my chest, groceries forgotten in my hands. I don't know how long she stood there. Maybe she thought I'd come down. Maybe she thought I'd feel something other than the strange, detached ache that took root inside me in that moment. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not older, just smaller. Like a person you once feared but now saw clearly, stripped of her illusions. And I'll be honest, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won. I thought I wanted them to hurt. But now that they're bleeding, I'm not sure I can stomach the mess. You tell me, did I finally break the cycle, or just break the family?